A ceasefire is in effect. In the Middle East, a fragile quiet has descended after 12 days of fire and fury. But this is not peace. This is a pause, a moment for the world to catch its breath before the next move is made on a chessboard that has been violently overturned. What we have just witnessed is not simply another flare-up in a volatile region. It is the public, brutal manifestation of a shadow war that has finally burst into the light. The old rules are gone, the old understandings are shattered. We have entered a new and far more dangerous era of direct confrontation between Iran, Israel, and the United States. For years, this conflict was fought in the shadows. It was a war of whispers and deniability. It was waged through sophisticated cyber attacks that crippled infrastructure. It was fought through the targeted assassinations of brilliant scientists on busy city streets. It was a war of proxies, where regional allies like Hezbollah and the Houthis would do the bidding of their patrons. It was a war of covert strikes on ships and secret facilities, attacks that were never officially claimed but whose origins were an open secret. This was the accepted paradigm, a violent but contained struggle that allowed all sides to maintain a veneer of distance. That paradigm is now history. The alleged American airstrikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities crossed a line that was once considered inviolable. This was not a proxy attack. This was a direct strike by a superpower on the sovereign territory of another nation, aimed at the very heart of its national pride and strategic ambition. It was a declaration. A statement that the patience for containment had run out and that Washington and its allies were now willing to risk open war to achieve their objectives. The target was not just concrete and centrifuges, the target was the very concept of Iran's strategic deterrence. In response, Iran's retaliation was not a blind act of rage. It was a precise and calculated move. A missile strike on a United States military base in Qatar. This was a signal. It was strong enough to preserve national honor. It was a message to its own people and to its allies across the region that Iran does not bow to pressure. It was proof that an attack on Iranian soil would be met with an attack on American assets. Yet the response was also controlled. It was an act of escalation that deliberately left a door open for de-escalation. It was a move that, according to Tehran, forced President Trump to immediately call for the ceasefire that is now in place. Iran demonstrated that it has mastered the complex dance of controlled escalation, using force not just to destroy but to compel its adversary to talk. So, we find ourselves here, in a tense standoff where a new threshold for confrontation has been established. Both sides have now tasted the reality of direct military exchange. They have tested each other's resolve and have a clearer, more frightening understanding of the consequences. This ceasefire is therefore not a solution. It is a tactical pause in a long-term strategic struggle. It is a moment for both sides to assess the damage, recalibrate their strategies, and prepare for the next round. The fundamental conflict has not been resolved. It has only become more open, more direct, and infinitely more dangerous. At the same time, another war is being waged with equal intensity. A war of narratives, a war where information is the primary weapon and perception is the battlefield. In the hours and days following the American airstrikes, the world was flooded with conflicting accounts. President Trump declared a resounding success, claiming that the Fordow nuclear facility, buried nearly 100 meters beneath a mountain, was completely destroyed. It was a victory speech designed to project strength, to reassure a nervous Israeli ally, and to force Iran into a position of weakness at any future negotiating table. This narrative was crucial for a White House that needed to justify its high-risk maneuver. But this triumphant story was immediately challenged. Independent analysis firms and even NASA's own satellite imagery raised serious questions. Heat signatures from explosions were detected, but they were reportedly several kilometers away from the known entrances to the Fordow facility. Did the multi-billion-dollar bunker-busting bombs miss their target? Or was the United States targeting a different, unknown part of the complex? Defense experts cautioned that assessing damage to such a deeply buried and fortified structure is incredibly difficult. It requires more than just satellite photos. It demands a complex mosaic of intelligence, from signal monitoring to human sources on the ground. The truth, they warned, would take time to emerge. Israel, the nation with arguably the most at stake, remained cautiously ambiguous. A senior Israeli official stated it was simply too early to know the real effectiveness of the strike. The chief of staff of the Israel Defense Forces offered a more nuanced assessment. He claimed Iran's nuclear program had been systemically damaged, set back for many years. He chose his words carefully. Not a mortal blow, he said, but systemic damage. This suggests a strategy not of total annihilation, but of 1,000 cuts, designed to perpetually delay Tehran's nuclear ambitions. The CIA echoed this sentiment, asserting it had credible evidence of serious damage that would take years to repair. Iran, for its part, deployed its own powerful counter-narrative. The government claimed it had anticipated the attack. It alleged that it had successfully evacuated critical personnel and, most importantly, its stockpile of enriched uranium before the first bombs fell. Satellite images from private firms seemed to support this, showing a flurry of activity with large trucks near Fordow in the days leading up to the strike. Tehran's message was clear: you struck an empty shell, you wasted your bombs, our program is safe and your victory is an illusion. Furthermore, Iranian state media framed the entire sequence of events to their advantage. They did not accept a ceasefire, they imposed it. They claimed their swift and powerful retaliation against the American base in Qatar is what forced the enemy to sue for peace. In this telling, Iran is not the victim. It is the victor, the one who dictated the terms of de-escalation. This battle of stories is fundamental to understanding modern conflict. Controlling the narrative is as important as controlling territory. It shapes public opinion at home and abroad. It bolsters the morale of your allies and demoralizes your adversaries. It defines who is seen as the aggressor and who is the defender. In this deeply ambiguous information environment, the truth becomes a casualty, and the world is left to choose which version of reality it wants to believe. This strategic ambiguity itself becomes a tool, allowing all sides to claim a measure of success while leaving the true extent of the damage and the true balance of power shrouded in uncertainty. Perhaps the most profound and paradoxical outcome of this direct military confrontation is its effect on the very issue it was meant to solve: Iran's nuclear program. The stated objective of the United States and Israel was to cripple, delay, or destroy Iran's path to a nuclear weapon. But the airstrikes may have achieved the exact opposite. They may have destroyed some infrastructure, but in doing so, they have fortified the political will in Tehran to acquire the ultimate deterrent. This is the tragic logic of the security dilemma. In a move of immense strategic significance, the Iranian parliament voted to suspend all cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. This is the world's nuclear watchdog. For years, its inspectors have been the world's eyes and ears inside Iran's controversial program, installing cameras, taking samples, and providing at least a baseline of transparency. Now, that window is being slammed shut. The justification from Tehran is both a grievance and a warning. They argue that the IAEA itself, by passing resolutions condemning Iran, had paved the way for Israel and the US to attack. They claim the international body failed to protect them and even failed to condemn the military strikes on their nuclear facilities, an act they see as a flagrant violation of international law. The message is chilling. If the international system will not protect us, we will protect ourselves. We will no longer submit to inspections that we believe are being used to gather intelligence for our enemies. This decision pushes Iran's nuclear program deeper into the dark. It creates a black box at the heart of the world's most volatile region. Without IAEA oversight, the international community will have no reliable way of knowing how fast Iran is enriching uranium, what new technologies it is developing, or how close it is to a potential breakout. This lack of information breeds fear and suspicion. It will force Iran's adversaries to rely on less reliable intelligence and to plan for worst-case scenarios. The risk of miscalculation by either side increases exponentially. A suspicious satellite image, a garbled piece of intelligence, could be misinterpreted as a dash for the bomb, potentially triggering a preemptive war. More fundamentally, the attacks have provided the ultimate argument for the hardliners in Iran. For years, a debate has raged within the Iranian regime about the wisdom of pursuing a nuclear weapon. Moderates argued for diplomacy and economic integration. Hardliners insisted that only a nuclear deterrent could guarantee the survival of the Islamic Republic. They would point to North Korea, which has a bomb and is untouchable, and contrast it with Libya's Gaddafi or Iraq's Saddam Hussein, who gave up their weapons programs and were ultimately overthrown. The American airstrikes have now handed these hardliners a decisive, irrefutable argument. They can now say to their people, "We told you so. Diplomacy failed. The international community abandoned us. Our only true guarantee of security, our only way to prevent another attack is to build the bomb." The strikes may have set the program back physically by a few years, but they may have advanced it politically by a generation. This entire episode illustrates a dangerous cycle. Actions taken by one side to enhance its own security are perceived as an existential threat by the other, compelling them to take even more drastic measures, which in turn confirms the first side's original fears. It is a self-perpetuating vortex of escalation. By attempting to surgically remove the threat, the United States and Israel may have inadvertently created a political imperative that makes the threat more real and more inevitable than ever before. The world may have just witnessed the beginning of a genuine nuclear arms race in the Middle East, one born from the ashes of a failed policy of military coercion. This crisis is also a stark reflection of a shifting global order. The Middle East is no longer a stage where the United States is the sole director. Other major actors have stepped forward, and their involvement is reshaping the geopolitical landscape. Chief among them is China. Beijing's response was swift and unequivocal. It strongly condemned the American military action as a grave violation of the United Nations Charter, but its involvement went far beyond rhetoric. China's foreign minister, Wang Yi, engaged in a flurry of high-level diplomacy, holding direct phone calls with his counterparts in both Iran and Turkey. To Iran, he offered China's firm support for its sovereignty and national security. This was not just a statement of principle. It was a strategic reassurance from one great power to a beleaguered partner. It was a signal to Washington that Iran is not isolated. China called for a real ceasefire to stabilize the situation, positioning itself as a force for peace and stability, an alternative to what it portrays as American unilateralism and aggression. Beijing's active role serves its own interests perfectly. It deepens its alliance with Iran, a key node in its Belt and Road Initiative and a vital energy supplier. It also allows China to champion the cause of national sovereignty, a cornerstone of its own foreign policy, and to burnish its credentials as a leader of the non-Western world. Simultaneously, China's engagement with Turkey highlights the growing importance of regional powers. Turkey, hosting a meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, has sought to frame the crisis within the broader context of Middle Eastern politics. The Turkish foreign minister, in his call with Wang Yi, emphasized that the core issue of the region remains Palestine. By linking the Iranian crisis to the long-standing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Turkey and the OIC are attempting to rally a common Islamic voice against what they see as Western and Israeli aggression. They are trying to set their own agenda, one that is not dictated by Washington. The statement from China's foreign minister that peace needs strength, but strength does not necessarily bring true peace, is particularly telling. It is a subtle but clear critique of the American approach of coercive force. It presents a different philosophy, one that champions dialogue and the UN Security Council as the primary mechanisms for resolving disputes. This entire diplomatic dance reveals a new multipolar reality in the Middle East. The era of unchallenged American dominance is fading. A new configuration of power is emerging, where China, Russia, and influential regional states like Turkey are asserting their influence, filling the vacuums left by American hesitation or overreach, and offering different paths forward. The United States can no longer assume that its actions in the region will go unchallenged, or that it will be the sole arbiter of outcomes. Every move on the chessboard is now being watched and countered by other powerful players. So where does this leave us? We stand on a precipice, looking into a future defined by profound uncertainty. The ceasefire, while welcome, is merely a bandage on a gaping wound. The fundamental drivers of the conflict have not been addressed, they have been inflamed. The path forward is fraught with peril, and the fate of the region hinges on the answers to a series of critical questions. First, what will become of the proposed talks between the United States and Iran? President Trump has indicated a delegation will meet with Iranian officials, yet in the same breath, he has downplayed the necessity of an agreement. Is this a genuine diplomatic opening, a chance to pull back from the brink and forge a new, more comprehensive nuclear deal? Or is it merely a political maneuver, a tactic by both sides to buy time, regroup, and prepare for the next confrontation? The level of mistrust is so profound that the prospects for a genuine breakthrough seem tragically slim. Second, what will Iran do now, operating in the shadows without the watchful eyes of the IAEA? Freed from international oversight, will Tehran make a calculated dash toward a nuclear weapon, or will it continue its strategy of creeping ever closer to the threshold, accumulating the necessary technology and materials without taking the final fateful step? The world will be flying blind, forced to rely on satellite imagery and clandestine intelligence, a recipe for misinterpretation and disaster. Every ambiguous construction project, every unusual energy signature will be scrutinized as potential evidence of a breakout, dramatically lowering the threshold for another preemptive strike. Third, how will Israel and the United States respond to this new reality? They have demonstrated their willingness to use direct military force. If they obtain intelligence, credible or not, that Iran is on the verge of acquiring a bomb, will they launch a much larger, more devastating military campaign? A full-scale war with Iran would be catastrophic, engulfing the entire region in flames, shattering the global economy, and leading to unimaginable human suffering. Yet, for leaders in Jerusalem and Washington who have defined an Iranian nuclear weapon as an existential threat, the alternative of inaction may seem even more unthinkable. They are trapped in a logic that points inexorably toward a wider conflict. Finally, what role will China and Russia play as this crisis unfolds? Will they provide a diplomatic and economic safety net for Iran, shielding it from American pressure and sanctions? Will their support embolden Tehran to take greater risks? Or will they act as a restraining influence, using their leverage to prevent Iran from crossing the nuclear threshold while also cautioning the United States against further military adventures? The actions of these other great powers will be a decisive factor in determining whether this crisis can be managed or whether it will spiral completely out of control. We have moved beyond a simple conflict over a nuclear program. This is now a crucible for the future of the Middle East and a test for the emerging global order. It is a battle of military power, of economic resilience, of national will, and of the ability to control the story the world believes. The quiet that has fallen over the region is deceptive. It is the tense, heavy silence of a world holding its breath, waiting for the next move on this perilous chessboard. In